Mark my words. When all else fails, we know that statement, don't we? When all else fails. Okay? We know that. We say that as kind of like a last resort. When all else fails. Now, when do we say that? We could say it for a few reasons, like maybe a diet. When all else fails, anybody heard of lettuce spray? Somebody showed that to me. I don't know how that would help me on a diet. Other than that, I would hate the diet even more. That's all I know. How about, hey, when I was going to say, when you got to run back to somebody, who's always good to go back to? You know you can. When all else fails, and we got one right back. Oh, he's not with Mama right now, but that's okay. Run back to Mom. Isn't that the truth, though? I had to put some cute picture in there because, you know, all the ladies, really, come on. Oh, okay, good. We got that. When all else fails, okay, this is mine because I work a crazy schedule. Anybody work night shifts ever? Okay? When all else fails, especially on Sundays, take a nap. Anybody there with me? Okay, good. I'm telling you, that's what I'm talking about. And finally, when you think about this, when you ever get tired, especially the ladies, and I know some of the guys do cook as well, but when you're just tired of cooking, when all else fails, microwave. Isn't that the truth? I thought that was a nice little picture. It says, what did you learn in today's class? The take-out menus in the top drawer, and when all else fails, microwave. Good girl. Anybody fall to that sometimes? Okay. I thought I might be the only one. I don't know. But that's good. Why do we seem to use that, though? When all else fails, we wait to the best solution. We want the best answer, talk to the perfect someone, and we always do it when everything else fails. You see, there's a problem in the world today, and probably in a lot of people's lives, maybe you can relate, especially in the world that we live in. We can never fully trust really anyone. Isn't that the truth? I mean, not that you could ever really trust politicians, but I think more than ever, there's question about that. There's question in relationships, everything. I mean, we put our hope into people, into doctors. We hope they can help us. Our spouses, and you know, I think if you've been married any amount of time, you know that they're not perfect. We put our hope into family members or friends, and the truth is not a single one of those people will ever be good enough to the point where they never fail you. They're always going to fail you. We're imperfect. And at some time or another, they're going to let us down. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've got a family member right now, or a spouse, or a friend, it could be a doctor, anyone, a relationship where they're just not measuring up. They're not measuring up. What do we do? Where do we go? Who can we fully count on when all else fails? Who can we fully count on? We're continuing this series, as you see, Mark My Words, in the book of Mark. And in the book of Mark chapter 5, there's two stories that we're going to look at to see how Jesus responded in both situations, in both stories, when he challenged people to have the deepest trust, or as the Bible calls it, the deepest faith in difficult situations. Faith and trust when all hope seemed gone. So we're going to look at these two stories. First of all, Jesus' first response reinforces our need to have bold faith. Okay? What is bold faith? Well, we're going to take a look at this first story to find out exactly what that is. In the book of Mark chapter 5, starting at verse 21, I'm going to read to you this first section here. And it starts out with this. It says, Jesus got into the boat again and went to the other side of the lake, where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Then a leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. "My little daughter is dying," he said. "Please come and lay your hands on her. Heal her so she can live." Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them, and she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about this Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe, for she thought to herself, "If I can just touch his robe, I'll be healed." Immediately after touching the robe, the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him. And so he turned around to the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" I love this, the disciples. His disciples said to him, "Look at the crowd pressing around you. How can you ask, 'Who touched me?' I mean, there's people everywhere." But when he kept looking around to see who had done it, then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." Man. So here we have this woman who suffered from a bleeding condition for 12 years. And understand that she was considered an outcast in this culture because of this condition. People a lot of times looked at the people's medical condition and they were shunned. And this woman had bled for 12 years. She was considered an outcast. Not only that, but even in religious circles with church people, she was looked at as an outcast or unclean because of what her condition that she was dealing with. Nobody wanted her around. So with a large crowd gathering, she probably thought, everybody's focused on this Jesus guy. Just maybe they won't notice me. I'm sure she was probably thinking. And she made her way. She was desperate for help. She had spent every dime she had to try to get help from any doctor, anything that she could. She exhausted every effort and was worse off in the end. She was at her wit's end. Everything else had failed. Everything had failed her. And I don't know, maybe you're there right now. Whether you know Jesus as your Savior or you don't yet, I'm sure we've all been there at some point in time where everything seemed to fail, no matter what effort we had done. But then she took a bold step of faith, had that bold faith, and reached out to Jesus. Maybe, just maybe, if I touch the hem of his garment, if I grab onto his robe, maybe that's close enough. Maybe I'll get healed. Trusting that would do that. You know, there was a missionary that's long gone from George Mueller is his name, from over in England, Bristol, England, and he said this once. It's really powerful. This is how we should look at faith. Faith does not operate in the realm of the possible. There's no glory for God in that which is humanly possible. Faith begins where man's power ends. And I've heard people say, you want a God-sized answer to your prayer, but you pray with a man-sized faith. You don't really believe it's going to happen. You're thinking from human terms. And we got to think beyond that, is what they're getting at. And this woman had tried everything in human efforts to see healing come. It was only when she took this bold step of faith, just hoping, you think maybe they have a medicine or something here. She's like, if I could just grab onto this guy's robe, onto his, his shirt tail, whatever, something's going to happen. And she took this bold step of faith to trust that Jesus for this healing. And you see, folks, each of us at some point in our lives have probably tried many ways, not only for physical healing, but to find emotional healing or hope or maybe fulfillment in relationships and connections with people. We've tried everything. And we needed to take that first step of bold faith to trust Jesus. I wanted my other relationships in order. But it's only when I get my relationship with Christ in order that those things seem to fall more in line. How is our relationship? Have we taken that bold step of faith? Now, the second response when Jesus was in this next story, it's connected right away. He tells us that we need to have what I call fearless faith. Fearless faith. And if we continue on the very next verse, verse 35, and this is dealing with Jairus, the synagogue official at the beginning. It says, while he was still speaking to her, the woman that was just healed, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. They told him, your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now. But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just have faith. Imagine that. Somebody just comes up to you. You're wanting your child to get well, and they say, don't bother calling this preacher you want to pray over this child. And this is not just a preacher, this is Jesus, the Son of God. Don't bother him anymore because your child's dead. What do? And Jesus says, don't be afraid, just have faith. Then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except for Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. And he went inside and asked, why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead, she's only asleep. The crowd laughed at him, but he made them all leave. And he told the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples, he took them into the room where the girl was lying. Holding her hand, he said to her, Talitha cum, which means little girl, get up. And the girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around. They were overwhelmed and totally amazed. Wow. You know, so we have the synagogue leader, Jairus. He's like a prominent leader, obviously, the leader of the local synagogue. Messengers from his house say, hey, don't bother Jesus. Your daughter's already dead. But then Jesus says that powerful statement, don't be afraid, or do not fear. Do not fear, just have faith. Do not fear. You got something going on in your life right now? Do not fear. But you don't have to do not fear. You know, in the Bible, it says at least 365 times, God tells us, do not fear. Do you think he meant it? 365 plus times. Do not fear. Don't be afraid. We get worried. You know, in Philippians, it says, don't worry about anything. You know, and it goes into the passage here in Philippians 4. Do not fear. You know, if he says it that many times, I think it's important. You see, when we're in a close relationship with Jesus, if you're in a close relationship with Jesus, we don't find fear in a close relationship with Jesus. If you're starting to be afraid, ask yourself, for one, man, did I spend time with the Lord today? Have I spent time with him today? Because when we're in a close relationship, we don't find fear, we find peace. Even in that passage in Philippians, it says, when we lay our request before God, that he guards our hearts and our minds, his peace that passes all understanding. It doesn't mean that we won't have hard times. It doesn't mean that we won't have difficulties. It just means during those times, if we are resting in him, we can find peace. We can find comfort. Maybe the loss of a loved one or a relationship that you're in and it's struggling, but you rest in him. And I can tell you from personal experience times that I said, I don't like this. I hate it. And I was yelling out to God, I hate this. But I was pressing into him and I said, but I trust you. And I know that you'll bring me peace. And God did. God did. See, I don't know if you've ever needed that. I know I have, countless times. So they finally get to Jairus' home. There they find people weeping and wailing because the girl is supposedly dead. And here's something that used to bother me. And I didn't understand why until I kind of studied up on this. I didn't quite understand the response of the crowd. Here they are weeping and wailing. And in verses 38 to 40 again it says, when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. He went inside and asked, why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead, she's only asleep. So the crowd laughed at him. But he made them all leave. And he took the girl's father, mother, and the 3 disciples into the room where the girl was lying. You know, when I did research years ago and first really went in depth on this, I realized back then that they had what were called, if I get this right, professional mourners. People that would go, I guess they go to when somebody passed away or died, or they get there a little early, like they're going to die, so might as well get over there. And they were paid to mourn, weeping and wailing. So I understood a little bit better. I believe this is probably the situation here because, really fake crying, I don't get that. But Jesus probably, knowing their response and knowing who they were, his quick response was basically, in layman's terms, okay, get these guys out of here. I want mom and dad, and I want the 3 disciples. And I almost think, I want them, and this crowd that's faking it, that isn't even real, has to leave. And they're going to miss the true blessing that's going to happen here. So, and then he went in there. You see, there's times in our lives that we are to take those bold, fearless faith steps, okay? And people will try to convince you that you're wrong, that you're crazy, that they might even laugh at you. God would never do that. And isn't it obvious what God really wants you to do? Isn't it obvious what you should do? Why would he ever tell you to do that? And you know, they might laugh in your face, but you see, we trust not in the wisdom of mere men, but we trust in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, the creator of all things, and understand that when we take steps of fearless faith, I heard this, this isn't my quote, somebody said before, I couldn't find who actually said it. It says, the will of God will never take you, or the grace of God will not protect you. And if God's will is for you to take a step of fearless faith, he's going to be with you every step of the way with that. You know, we sit there. I saw a picture. I should have put it up there. I'm just thinking, I saw this picture of this kid going on a roller coaster, just freaking out. It's probably his first time. And mom's sitting next to him going like that, and the kid's just terrified. But that's kind of like God's over here going, this is awesome. Look what we're doing. Why are you scared? This is fun, you know, because mom knows everything's going to be okay. You know, and I think that's why we need to take those steps. Because friends, people will always have advice for you. If you hear God really speaking to you, if you look and say, man, I feel like God's wanting me to take this step of faith, maybe it's to take that step and follow Jesus. Oh, there's all kinds of church, all kinds of beliefs. But Jesus is waiting right there. What do we do when all else fails in our efforts, in our relationships, in our attempts to find hope, our attempts to find fulfillment? Maybe we go from relationship to relationship, whether it be romantic, friendships, you name it. And it seems like everything is failing. Maybe the situation you're in, maybe it's a medical condition. Everything's failing. We need to take that first step of bold faith to reach out, to take hold of Jesus. Maybe to take hold of him for the first time, to start that relationship. Maybe you said, I've tried it. Everything. Nothing brings me the hope that I need. Right when I think it does, it lets me down. Maybe that step we need to take today. Maybe you need to take it. Do not leave here without taking that step if you've never done that. Secondly, what do we do when Jesus has told us something and the crowds are telling us something different? You're crazy. I think the steps that we've taken even with this church at the beginning, why would you ever do that? I even said, why would we ever meet in this building? It was a daycare. Why would we meet here? But we stepped out and trusted God. He showed us clearly what we need to do. Maybe you need to take that step of fearless faith, because God calls us out of our comfort zone. When he does that, that's when he does the greatest work in our life, when we're willing to take a step of fearless faith. What steps do you need to take today? Is there one that you need to? We're going to give you an opportunity here. I'm going to ask Pastor Wade to come up and kind of wrap us up.
Well, thanks, Mark, Pastor Mark, for the challenge that you've